Okay, so you want to own a NASCAR team. Find a garage, hire the engineers, watch the checkered flags come in. But here's the strange part. NASCAR is the only major motorsport in the world where the manufacturer provides the base vehicle. The tracks are standardized, and the rulebook is so tight that two competing cars can be nearly identical. And yet it's also the sport where the smartest, most well-funded owners on the planet keep hemorrhaging money and folding their operations. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how that's possible, how NASCAR teams actually make money on the inside, why having a fast car still isn't enough to guarantee a profit, and why a NASCAR team isn't really the business most people think it is. NASCAR teams come in three sizes, and they're three completely different businesses. A small single-car backmarker operation costs $3 to $6 million a year just to keep running. For that money, you get one car, a skeleton crew, a leased engine program, and a driver who's probably partially funding his own seat. You'll qualify for most races, finish in the back half of the field, and spend most of your season chasing sponsorship calls that never get returned. A mid-sized 2 or 3 car team runs you $25 to $50 million annually. A real shop, real engineers, real data analysts, and drivers with actual name recognition. You're competitive enough to steal a win here and there, and sponsors are willing to have a conversation. And then there's the top tier, the superpowers. Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, Team Penske. Running 4 full-time Cup Series cars costs north of $200 million a year. We're talking state-of-the-art wind tunnels, simulation rigs, over 500 employees, and enough engineering depth to develop technology that filters down to every other team in the garage, whether they like it or not. But the team itself is just the start. 2 more costs nobody warns you about. The first is the charter. In 2016, NASCAR introduced a charter system, essentially a franchise license guaranteeing your car a spot in every race and a share of the television revenue. There are exactly 36 charters in existence. When charters started trading on the open market, they went for around $2 million. By 2024, a single charter was selling for $40 million or more. No charter means no guaranteed entry, which means every week you're a small team hoping you're fast enough to make the field on speed alone. Most weeks, you're not. The second is the manufacturer relationship. Ford, Chevrolet, and Toyota each support a small number of aligned teams with engineering resources, technical data, and subsidized parts programs. Getting into that circle is not just about money. It's about politics, relationships, and proving you belong at the table. The wrong manufacturer relationship, or no relationship at all, puts you at a structural disadvantage before the engine even fires. Now we get to the question that actually matters. Where does the money come from? Every NASCAR team runs on a financial model that is almost entirely inverted compared to other sports franchises. An NFL team makes most of its money from the league. A NASCAR team makes most of its money from outside the league entirely. The industry has a name for this. Primary sponsorship, easiest way to picture it. Imagine your car as a 3,400-pound billboard doing 200 miles per hour on live national television for 4 hours every Sunday. The hood of the car, the primary real estate, sells for $15 to $25 million per season at the top level. The quarter panels, the rear bumper, the B-post, the driver's suit, the hauler, the pit box. Every inch of visible surface has a price attached to it. A top-tier car like a Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolet can generate $30 to $40 million in total sponsorship inventory per season across primary, associate, and contingency deals. But primary sponsorship is also the most unstable revenue source imaginable. Companies come and go. Marketing budgets get cut. A driver has a bad year and suddenly the phone stops ringing. In 2023, several prominent Cup Series teams entered the season with significant races unsponsored, running in plain or manufacturer liveries with no paying partner on the hood. The math on sponsorship looks like this. A team spending $20 million a year on operations needs to sell roughly $15 to $18 million in sponsorship. Miss by 20% and you're losing $3 to $4 million on the year. Do that 3 years in a row and the team is gone. Now, the infrastructure. The same 40 cars show up at 38 different racetracks across 38 weekends. Pocono to Talladega. Sonoma to Daytona. Road courses, superspeedways, short tracks, intermediate ovals. Each one demands a completely different setup, different tire strategy, different aerodynamic configuration. A top team builds between 12 and 15 complete car bodies per season. Each one costs $150,000 to $200,000 to construct. Crash one at Daytona on lap 12, which happens regularly, and you've just turned $180,000 into scrap aluminum in under 2 seconds. The industry has a term for managing this: fleet management, and the teams that do it best treat their cars less like race cars and more like surgical instruments. Cataloged, rebuilt, optimized. And then there's the most powerful competitive tool in the modern garage: data. A single NASCAR Cup car runs over 100 sensors simultaneously during a race. Tire temperature, brake temperature, throttle position, steering input, suspension travel, fuel consumption. All of it streaming in real time to a team of engineers watching from a timing stand. The teams that can afford the most engineers, the best simulation software, and the deepest historical data libraries have a structural advantage that money alone can't overcome once it's established. Hendrick Motorsports has been collecting race data since 1984. That institutional knowledge is worth more than any single sponsorship deal. Hendrick and Gibbs discovered something else that runs even deeper, something the rest of the industry calls the charter system arbitrage. Not only do top teams earn more from charter distributions, they also use their scale to generate revenue streams that smaller teams structurally cannot access. It's not that smaller teams are less competent, it's that their position in the ecosystem makes certain revenue impossible to reach. Big teams monetize this in multiple ways. Engine leasing. Hendrick Motorsports and Toyota's engine program both lease power plants to smaller aligned teams for approximately $3,000 to $5,000 per race weekend per engine. With multiple customer teams running their engines across a full season, that's a multi-million-dollar revenue line that costs the supplier team almost nothing incremental once the development is already paid for. Top teams sell last-generation equipment to smaller operations. Shock absorbers, gearboxes, steering components, all moving through a secondary market that keeps smaller teams alive and generates quiet revenue for the big shops. Driver development. Toyota's TRD program, Ford Performance, and Chevrolet all fund driver pipelines through the Truck and Xfinity series. Teams aligned with those manufacturers get access to funded young drivers, which means a seat that pays the team rather than costs it. Expertise, it turns out, compounds in NASCAR, because the team with the most resources can test more, learn more, and sell what they've learned to everyone below them in the food chain. Here's what makes this actually dangerous. Think about every confident new ownership group that has entered NASCAR in the last decade, with a big checkbook and a bigger announcement. Confidence reads as commitment. The garage respects the person who shows up with resources and intent. But that instinct misleads the market constantly. The loudest entrance is statistically more likely to be followed by a quiet exit 2 to 3 years later. Because NASCAR eats capital at a rate that surprises almost everyone who hasn't operated inside it. This is not just an individual team problem, it scales across the entire sport. It explains why NASCAR itself has spent the last decade restructuring its economics from the top down, introducing the charter system, renegotiating television deals, mandating the next-gen car, specifically, to reduce the cost gap between large and small teams. The 2022 next-gen car was NASCAR's most deliberate attempt to level the playing field in the sport's history. Single-source parts, standardized components. The theory was that if every team starts with the same building blocks, the performance gap narrows and smaller teams become viable businesses. In practice, the big teams simply hired more engineers to optimize the standardized components faster than anyone else could. The gap narrowed. It did not close. And here's the part that should make any prospective owner pause. You are not exempt from the math. Roger Penske has been winning in motorsport since 1966. His operation is the gold standard of professionalism in American racing. And even Penske's team went through years of relative struggle in NASCAR before finding its current footing. If the captain, as the garage calls him, needed decades to optimize his NASCAR operation, the timeline for a new entrant to reach profitability is not measured in seasons. It's measured in generations of leadership. This doesn't mean it's impossible. Trackhouse Racing launched in 2021 with Justin Marks and Pitbull as co-owners, acquired a charter, hired the right people, and within 2 years had a race-winning operation with international expansion plans. But Trackhouse bought an existing infrastructure. They didn't build from zero. You also have moments where the sport creates genuine opportunity. When a top team folds, their charter, their shop, their equipment, and sometimes their manufacturer relationship all hit the market simultaneously. That window, usually 60 to 90 days before the assets scatter, is the actual entry point for a serious buyer. The uncomfortable version of NASCAR ownership isn't other teams are struggling. It's which part of my financial model am I overestimating right now? There's a way to make this work, and it's almost embarrassingly similar to every other successful sports business model. The teams that survive don't think of themselves as race teams. They think of themselves as marketing platforms that happen to race cars. Denny Hamlin, co-owner of 23XI Racing, alongside Michael Jordan, said it directly in a 2023 interview. The race car is the content, everything else is the business. Sponsorship activation, social media reach, merchandise, licensing, driver appearances, branded content deals. The on-track product drives the value of every off-track asset, which means winning matters enormously, not just for trophies, but for the revenue multiplier that winning puts on every other line of the P&L. The antidote to the capital trap isn't spending less. It's diversifying the revenue base so that no single sponsorship departure breaks the model. Having 3 $7 million sponsors is structurally safer than one $21 million primary. Having revenue from engine leasing, merchandise, and charter appreciation means the team's financial health doesn't live and die on one renewal conversation every October. The slope from struggling backmarker to sustainable operation is not quick. The valley that most new teams spend their first 3 years in, enough runway to keep racing, but not enough scale to reach profitability, is not a failure state. It is the threshold every successful team in NASCAR history has had to cross, where real competitiveness lives, where the sponsorship calls come to you instead of the other way around. Think about what this actually means for the decisions an owner makes every week. Which races to fully fund, which driver to commit to long-term, whether to lease or build engines, whether to run 2 cars or 3. The most dangerous words in NASCAR ownership are, "We'll figure out the sponsorship later." Because later always comes faster than expected, and the sport has a long memory for teams that ran out of runway before they ran out of ambition. The next time you see a new team announce their NASCAR entry with a splashy press release and a celebrity co-owner, ask yourself one question. Do they have enough capital to survive 3 years of learning before the model starts working? If the answer is unclear, they probably don't. The finish line always looks closer from the starting grid. That's not a flaw in the race, that's a flaw in the budget. 2 scenarios, real numbers. Scenario 1, $15 million in the Xfinity Series, a developmental 2-car operation. Annual operating cost around $12 to $15 million. With a manufacturer alliance, driver funding, and solid sponsorship, you can approach break-even by year 3. Not glamorous. Recession resistant. The most boring American business with the word racing in it. Scenario 2, $200 million in the Cup Series. A 4-car, superpowered operation with charter assets, engine program, and full manufacturer support. Annual revenue potential of $180 to $220 million across sponsorship, charter distributions, engine leasing, merchandise, and licensing. Net margin of 10 to 15% in a good year, meaning $20 to $30 million in profit. If everything goes right, payback on initial investment, 7 to 10 years minimum. And if you survive long enough, you become something specific. Roger Penske has been operating in motorsport for over 50 years. His racing operation today spans NASCAR, IndyCar, and International Series. His broader Penske Corporation, which includes automotive dealerships, trucking, and logistics, is valued at over $40 billion, built in part on the brand credibility that 600 race wins and 19 Indianapolis 500 victories created over 6 decades. So if you do decide to buy a NASCAR team, just remember the most important rule of this business. The house always wins. Just make sure your house has a charter.